headship, particularly urban headship, is a lonely business, that we're constantly under siege from Ofsted, the DFES, and so on. We're constantly under siege about results and pressure, constantly under the threat of being slapped back into special measures if you aren't good.
In 1996, North Manchester High School for Boys was put into special measures. The Ofsted report stated the inspection was critical of many aspects of the work of the school, including low standards of attainment, unsatisfactory progress, low attendance and weak strategic management. Head teacher Mel Woodcock was headhunted and brought in to turn the school around.
The school, when I arrived 10 years ago, was in something of a mess, although I don't think it was at its worst. I had to decide very, very quickly who were part of the solution and who were part of the problem. I had to do some pretty rigorous weeding at the time, and I don't think initially that they could make up their mind whether I was the Lord Saviour or Adolf Hitler, really. They didn't quite know where I was coming from. But it had to be done. It had to be done. It seemed to me that there were two tracks that you could go down in an urban boys' school. Firstly, I thought you could go down the sort of very regimented, tight uniform, everybody walking in a single file down the left of the corridor, all that sort of thing. Or we could try to do something different and to go for all the things that you would associate probably with a girls' school. So that's what I did. Art, drama, music, design, home economics, or food technology, or whatever it's calling itself this week. All the sorts of things that we thought would soften the edges of what we were doing. Not coincidentally, they happen to be things that you can succeed at without having fantastic literacy skills, because the literacy skills in the school were poor.
That's when we sit down and then you come over and you start giving your condolences.
Yeah, I know.
And then he gets up on it and starts going
narrating.
See what he's done and all that.
How's your mum feeling?
She's okay, no thanks to you.
What's that mean?
Dad, you always hit her. You know you do. You always go on at her and she don't even do anything to you. But all you do is just hit her and everything. She don't deserve to be treated like that.
What have I done? I've never hit your mum.
Yeah, you know you have. Well, no, you're probably too wasted to know that you even have done.
The approach seems to have had some success in that the boys have got massively increased confidence, that they've got better interpersonal skills. And I think that, as the rise in roll indicates, that we've regained a great deal of the confidence that we lost in the community. There's a lack of community structure within the school, so that we've to create a community which is the school, but which doesn't necessarily reflect anything that's out there. That once they get beyond the gate, things become very tribal, depending on whereabouts they live in the area. At its worst, that manifests itself in gangs, so that we in school try to make sure that that doesn't impact here, and that when they're actually inside the gates, that we are one community in the school. Our community isn't a community. We draw from any number of different communities. Our catchment area is kite-shaped, and if we're at the top, our catchment area flows down from it into the centre of Manchester to the bottom point of it, where our most disadvantaged pupils live. One of the results of the geographical spread of our catchment area is the number of feeder schools that we've got to deal with. Last year it was 41, I think this year it's 35. And as a general rule, it's somewhere between 30 and 40. It varies from year to year.
Hello, is that Jonathan's mum? Hi, it's Anne from school here. Jonathan's not in school again today.
One of the ways in which we've tried to combat that spread of catchment area and the attendance problems that arise from it has been by supplementing the local authorities' attendance improvement service with our own homeschool liaison officer. The primary role is to keep tabs on attendance, but not in a sort of enforcement way. In terms of addressing the underlying reasons why pupils aren't coming to school.
Stephen, what's the problem?
I've got too many IT lessons on my planner and I don't want to do IT
What would you like to do instead?
I want to do art.
So if we fill these lessons here with art instead of IT, would that make you want to come into school more often?
Yeah.
And also the other spare ones you've got, we could arrange for you to go up to Joanne in the learning mentor room and do some catching up on your other lessons. Would that make it better for you?
Yeah.
Yeah, it would. Okay, we'll try and sort that out for you today.
As a head teacher in an urban school, I suppose I spend my time in a way that's quite different to the head in a more advantaged school. The behaviour of our most challenging kids is a constant problem, and we've got to spend massive amounts of time trying to make sure that those behaviour problems are addressed for the sake of the pupils themselves. But equally, we've got a large number of pupils whose background, although perhaps not massively advantaged, is good, and a lot of my time is spent ensuring that in dealing with the challenges that we face from our most disadvantaged and our most challenging, that we don't forget that we've got a duty towards these other pupils who need to be stretched and developed and nurtured and cared for. In trying to move the school on, one of the biggest challenges was to recruit, train and retain good staff, and staff who can cope in a school like this. What we decided to do was to home grow our staff, and retaining them for 2 and sometimes 3 years wasn't a problem. And we found that what we were beginning to do was to have a staff who we trained. They were just getting very skilled after 2 or 3 years, but then they'd move on and we were losing them. So we developed something that we call the Excellence Ladder. Your first year is an induction year. Your second year, you get a small payment on top of your salary to do a piece of research that will support your own teaching and your own development. It goes on to a bit more for something that will affect your department or your year group, a bit more for something that's whole school, until finally we'd be expecting them to have got a management allowance or be looking at AST status or something like that. When I first arrived here, it was a very isolated position to be in, because a school in special measures, if you're not careful, it's almost as if you've got a disease, some nasty infectious disease that nobody wants to know you. I was really, really fortunate in that the head of the girls' school down the road and the head of the Catholic school along the road were really, really supportive, and right from the start were willing to work with me to improve standards here, in that their reasoning was that if we improve standards in this school, we improve standards in the whole area. This expanded when the leadership incentive grants came on stream, and we started working with another 4 schools from the northwest of the city as a group, and that's developed into a really, really strong alliance. The benefit of being part of a collaborative is you can help to offset those bad times in each other's schools by working together. So, can we begin then with what's on your mind? Has anybody got...
I've got a confession to make, and I'd quite like to make it in this company, knowing I should be safe.
Go on then.
I've become a recent convert to PSHE. I know this sounds awful, that it ought to have been central to my thinking as a head for a long time, but to be perfectly honest, it was quite peripheral.
At the beginning of our meetings, we have a session called What's on Your Mind, where basically we sit round and all the things that we've been sitting alone in our offices thinking, oh God, what are we going to do about? You come out with this, and suddenly other people around the table say, oh, thank goodness you've said that. It's just like that in my place.
Quite strong. So what we've done now is simply say, if we can't recruit anybody, well, let's just grow our own. And I've selected a group of teachers who are very powerful in different ways.
It's interesting to hear that we've gone for a different model this year. We used to operate that same model, and there was no ownership by our staff.
Of course, once we've got through that, we get to the what can we do about it, and that's where the strength of it comes.
On the inside of the label.
We've had a problem this morning, haven't we, Gary?
Right, what's happened now?
Well, do you know what it is, Mrs. Allen?
It must be a fake or something like that.
Well, what it is, it's called a BB gun. and it's BB gun because it fires ball bearings. He did this morning hit a boy on the neck and on this kid's back.
Well, are you sure it's Gary?
This kid's brother. Did anybody else fire this gun, Gary?
No.
Hang on a minute, Mr. Woodcock. When you said he hit this guy, where was he firing it?
It was on the corner of the field, just before you get onto the field, near the shops at the end. He was just there. No, he wasn't on school premises. But,
So it's got nothing to do with you then?
well, I've got to remind you that the boys are my responsibility and under my jurisdiction when they're in our uniform.
As far as I'm concerned, who Gary shoots in his own time is his own business.
One of the regrettable realities that we have to deal with is that the communities around us are becoming increasingly violent. As such, we've got to feel the results of that in school. So whereas in some communities the school would be going out and embracing the community, bringing it in and so on, that what we find ourselves doing a lot of the time is operating a filter system in trying to get the bits of the community that we want into the school and keep out the bits of the community that we want to discourage and not to see. A result of that is that we are very intolerant of fighting, and teenage boys, especially in a crowd at school, they're like a set of cockerels in a pit. They'll fight if you're not careful.
Hey, whoa! What we're talking about fighting? We don't accept fighting in the school. You, my office now. You, Miss Burns is.
They know that if they bring any sort of offensive weapon into school, a knife, a BB gun or whatever it might be, that they're out. Another approach that we've taken to dealing with the increasing violence in the area has been in conjunction with the Greater Manchester Police, in that they've allocated to our collaborative of schools 2 police officers under the Safer Schools Partnership Scheme who will assist us with issues where criminality is involved, and we've been particularly careful to use them to combat instances of pupils being attacked on their way to and from school, where there's been weaponry involved, when it's been severe bullying. Fortunately, we haven't needed to employ them in school, although they are in school quite a lot doing lots of positive work, but they've been a useful weapon in fighting the increase of violence and criminality in the areas around us. I think the main thing I've learnt is that the challenge is doable, and that large numbers of our pupils can really benefit from education in a way that will change their lives. Sometimes we don't see that when they're here, but we do learn about it when they've moved on to further education often, that we have succeeded in engaging them in a far bigger way than you would have thought. There seems to be a mythology around, particularly around some school improvement quarters, that if you put the right head in and he'll go in and everything suddenly will be wonderful. It won't. Urban schools are extremely fragile because of the challenges that they face. It only takes quite a small level of disturbance in the factors that surround us to make the place very unstable indeed. And I suppose therein lies the challenge.